They say some moments haunt you forever. Not because they were loud. Not because they were violent. But because they were quiet. So quiet, they echoed. It's been 2 years since that night. And I still can't sleep through till morning. I wake up, heart racing, eyes wide, asking myself the same question. Did I cross a line? Or did I simply step into a truth no one dares to name? I didn't plan it. I didn't want it. But God, I needed something. Something to remind me I was still alive. My name doesn't matter. But my story? It might be yours. It might be your mother's. Your sister's. Or maybe even your own. The one you've never told anyone. Not even yourself. Let me take you back. I was freshly divorced. Not the fiery, slam-the-door kind of divorce you see in movies. No. Mine was the slow, hollow kind. The kind where the love doesn't explode, it just evaporates. One unspoken disappointment at a time. We didn't scream. We didn't cry. We just stopped talking. And eventually, he left. And I stayed. With the silence. Everyone thought I was okay. Strong. Resilient. The rock of the family. But no one ever asked what it felt like. To make dinner for one. To fold laundry that no one would wear but you. To sleep on one side of the bed and never touch the other. I became a ghost in my own life. Until he showed up. Michael. My son-in-law. My daughter's husband. He wasn't supposed to see me like that. Broken. Lonely. Tired of pretending I was fine. But he did. He saw past the smiles I wore at Sunday brunch. Past the "I'm doing great" lies I told over text. He saw the woman I buried under routines, obligations, and quiet heartbreak. And what happened next? Even I didn't see coming. This isn't just a story about love or lust. It's a story about being seen. About what happens when the wrong person sees you at the right time. So, if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever stared at your reflection and wondered where you went, if you've ever craved connection so deeply it scared you, then maybe, just maybe, you'll understand. Because the story? It's not black and white. It's messy. It's human. And it changed everything. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where we unravel the stories people are too scared to tell. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Because after this night, there was no going back. After the divorce, I moved into the guest house behind our old family home. It was small. Just one bedroom, a little kitchenette, creaky wooden floors, but it was mine. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Truth is, it felt more like exile than freedom. I would wake up to silence. No footsteps. No clinking dishes. No one asking if I'd slept well. Just the hum of the fridge and the weight of my own thoughts. I was in my late 40s, but I felt ancient. Worn down by years of shrinking myself inside a marriage that had stopped making space for me. He didn't hit me. He didn't yell. He just disappeared. Even when he was there, he wasn't. For years, I tried to hold everything together. I smiled through dinner parties. I laughed at his jokes that weren't funny. I convinced myself that maybe all marriages lose their spark. That maybe being ignored was better than being hurt. But deep down, I was starving. For attention. For affection. For someone to ask me how I was and mean it. My husband had a mistress. Everyone pretended not to know. And I had my shame. My daughter, Clara, was the light of my life. Late 20s, newly married, radiant in ways I used to be. She was happy, busy building her life. And I didn't want to burden her with my pain. So I smiled for her too. She'd visit, bring groceries, call me Mama with that bright voice. And I'd play the part. I'd ask about her job, her home, her husband, and never once did she notice that I wasn't really there. Michael, her husband, was polite. Kind, even. He'd carry my heavy bags when she wasn't looking. Fix the lock on my door without being asked. He paid attention in a way that made me uncomfortable. Because it felt good. Too good. He was 30. Tall. Soft-spoken. Patient. But what stood out most was the way he noticed things. One evening, I spilled tea on the counter while they were over. No one blinked. But Michael? He quietly grabbed a cloth, wiped it up, and gave me a small nod. Not pity, not awkwardness, just presence. And in that moment, I realized how long it had been since someone had been fully with me. I told myself it was nothing. A gesture. A decent man being decent. But it was the first time in years that I felt seen without having to shout. I didn't even recognize my own voice anymore. I'd gotten so used to whispering, to keeping everything buried, to making myself smaller and smaller just to fit into the space my husband allowed me. But here, in that tiny guest house, with no one left to perform for, I started hearing myself again. Not the wife, not the mother, just me. Lonely, wounded, still aching for a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. That's when everything started to shift. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't dramatic. It was a slow unraveling. The kind you don't notice until you're standing in the middle of it and there's no way back to the person you used to be. It started on a Friday. Clara had a weekend work retreat, some conference 2 hours away. She asked if Michael could stay back, said he had work and didn't want to leave him bored. I told her, of course, that they didn't need to worry about me. I was fine. I wasn't fine. But I'd gotten good at saying it like I meant it. Michael called that morning. Asked if I needed help with anything around the house while Clara was away. I almost said no out of habit, but then I looked out at the backyard. The sagging lights. The half-finished garden bed. The broken garage latch I'd been ignoring. So I said yes. He showed up in jeans and a faded t-shirt, toolbox in hand, a bag of groceries tucked under his arm. He smiled like it was just another Saturday. Like this was nothing. But to me, it was the most attention I'd gotten in months. We started with the lights. They kept flickering, shorting out. I stood by holding screws, pretending to be useful. At one point, I dropped a screwdriver and laughed, nervous, clumsy. He bent down, picked it up, and looked at me for a second too long. Not inappropriate. Not suggestive. Just long enough for me to notice that he saw me. We moved on to the garage. It was hot. Dusty. He rolled up his sleeves, sweat on his neck. I offered him water. He smiled and said, "Only if you join me." So we sat on the porch. 2 plastic chairs. A pitcher between us. And we talked. Not about anything deep, at first. Work. The heat. The fact that I'd been meaning to fix the lights for over a year. Then I made a joke. Something about being useless with tools. He laughed, and then there was this moment, this tiny, quiet moment, where neither of us said anything. He looked down. I looked away. And something passed between us that neither of us named. Later, as the sun started to set, he brushed a leaf off my shoulder. It was small, innocent, but his hand lingered just a second too long, and my breath caught in my throat. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was tired, that I was reading into something that wasn't there. But then he offered to cook dinner. I hesitated, said I didn't want to trouble him. He shrugged, said, "You've been cooking for people your whole life. Let someone take care of you for once." And for some reason, that sentence nearly broke me, so I let him. He moved around the kitchen like he belonged there, chopping, stirring, humming softly. I sat at the counter, glass of wine in hand, watching. And then he asked me, "How are you?" Not the way people do when they're being polite. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't change the subject. He just waited. And I didn't know what to say. Because no one had asked me that and meant it in a long, long time. I told him I was okay. He didn't nod and move on. He said, "No, I mean really." And I just stared at him. Because I didn't know where to begin. The silence filled the space between us. Not awkward. Not heavy. Just real. I told him I'd been lonely. That sometimes I forgot what day it was. That I missed being touched without it meaning obligation. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix it. He just listened. And when I looked up, his eyes were soft. Not pitying. Not judging. Just there. It was the first time someone had asked me how I was. And actually waited for the answer. And that's when I knew something had shifted. Not loudly. Not suddenly. But enough that I couldn't ignore it. And I think neither could he. That night, after he left, I sat alone in the kitchen, wine glass still half full, dinner plates untouched. The silence was louder than usual. I kept replaying the way he looked at me. Not just looked, saw me. And I hated that I noticed. Worse, I hated that a part of me didn't want to forget. I asked myself, was I imagining it? Was I reading into something that wasn't there? Or worse, did I want it to be real? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, tracing the conversation in my mind, the way he leaned in when I spoke, the way his eyes didn't wander, the way I caught myself smiling just because he listened. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. I was his mother-in-law, for God's sake. And yet, there was this ache in my chest. Not lust, not even longing, just this deep, aching emptiness. Like something had been missing for so long, I forgot what it felt like to be full. I remembered how I used to be. Before the marriage, before the kids, before the slow disappearance of everything that made me me. I used to wear red, bright red lipstick, earrings that made noise when I walked, shoes that made me stand tall. And somewhere along the way, I traded them all for gray sweaters. Comfortable, safe, invisible. I stopped doing my hair unless I had to leave the house. Stopped painting my nails. Stopped raising my voice because when I did, it only echoed back in silence. I started whispering my opinions. Started doubting my thoughts. Started believing that maybe being small was easier than constantly being dismissed. And now, there was this man. Not a stranger. Not some forbidden fantasy. Michael. The man who married my daughter. The man who shouldn't have been anything more than family. But he was kind. And warm. And when he listened to me, he didn't look through me. That was what undid me. Not his body. Not his youth. Not even the fact that he was off limits. It was the way he made me feel like I mattered. And I hated myself for needing that so much. I told myself it was gratitude. That was all. He was helping around the house. He was being thoughtful. And I was just touched by the attention because I'd gone without it for too long. I was lonely. That was it. It wasn't about him. It was about the version of myself that showed up when I was around him, more awake, more alive, more real. But then night would fall. And the truth would come back like a cold wind under the door. Because I couldn't stop thinking about him. Not in the way you might expect. It wasn't fantasy. It was shame. I would close my eyes and see the way he smiled at me over the dinner table. The way his eyes softened when I told him I missed being touched. The way his hand hovered, just barely brushing mine when he passed me the wine. And then I'd open my eyes and tell myself to stop. He's your son-in-law. You are a grown woman. You should know better. But the shame didn't stop the thoughts. And the thoughts didn't stop the ache. I hadn't felt wanted in years. And now that I'd had a taste of being seen, even just a sliver of it, I didn't know how to go back to being invisible. After that night, things didn't go back to normal. Not completely. There was a new energy in the air. Not loud. Not obvious. But it was there, tucked into the quiet moments. Lingering in the pauses between our words. He started coming around more often. Said he wanted to help me get the place in better shape. I told myself it was innocent. That he was just being kind. That I was reading too much into things. But the way he looked at me said otherwise. We began sharing little parts of our days. Quick grocery runs. A stop for coffee on the way back. Mornings where he'd show up with a bag of bagels and say, "Thought you could use some company." And I always said yes. We'd sit in the garden, early sun warming our faces, mugs in hand, talking about nothing and everything. He told me about work. I told him about my favorite books, the ones I used to read before life got too loud. He listened like every word mattered. Sometimes we'd watch movies in the evening. Old classics. On that creaky couch in my guest house. He'd sit at one end. I'd sit at the other. At first. But over time, the space between us shrank. One night, as I reached for the remote, our hands touched. Neither of us pulled away immediately. It was a second. Maybe two. But it felt like the world went quiet. Neither of us spoke. We just sat there, staring at the screen, pretending we hadn't noticed. But we had. Another day, I was standing on a stool, trying to replace a set of curtains in the living room. He was supposed to be in the kitchen. I lost my balance. Not much, just enough to make my heart jump. And suddenly, he was there. His hands on my waist, steadying me. His face inches from mine. I could feel his breath. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Neither of us moved. The curtains hung limply beside us, forgotten. And in that moment, I forgot everything. Who he was. Who I was supposed to be. I looked at him. He looked back. I whispered, "I'm okay." And he said, "I know you're not." Just like that. No smile. No explanation. Just truth. And in that silence, everything changed. Because he wasn't talking about the fall. He was talking about me. He knew. He'd seen it all along. And somehow, he didn't turn away. That night, I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the way his hands had felt on my waist, firm, careful, present. I kept thinking about how no one had touched me like that in years. Not just physically, but with care. I knew it was dangerous. I knew we were towing a line that should never be crossed. But I also knew this. Once someone sees you that clearly, it's hard to be unseen again. And I wasn't ready to let that go. Not yet. It was raining. One of those heavy, relentless rains that shakes the windows and darkens the sky hours before sunset. The kind of rain that makes everything feel slower, heavier. The power went out around 7:30. I was just finishing up a book when the lights flickered once, then disappeared. I sat in the silence for a minute, listening to the storm and my own breath. Then there was a knock at the door. Michael, soaked from the shoulders down, holding a flashlight, his hoodie plastered to his arms. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, but my voice didn't follow. He stepped inside without waiting for permission, wiped his feet, took off his shoes. And just like that, he was there, in my space again. Familiar. Comforting. Dangerous. I lit a few candles and placed them around the room. The glow was soft. Warm. Almost intimate. He sat on the floor, back against the couch. I sat beside him, knees tucked under me, blanket around my shoulders. We talked. About the storm. About blackout memories from childhood. Then the conversation shifted. He told me he never really had a mother. She was there, physically, but not emotionally. Always too distracted. Too absent. He said he grew up learning to comfort himself. And I don't know why, but that cracked something open in me, because I had spent years doing the same. Smiling through pain. Clinging to silence. Telling myself that my needs were too much, that my feelings were inconvenient. I told him that. Not all of it. Just enough. He didn't say anything at first. He just reached for my hand. Held it gently in both of his. Then I felt it, a tear sliding down my cheek. Uninvited. Unstoppable. And without a word, he turned to me. Lifted his hand. Wiped it away with his thumb. His touch lingered, longer than it should have. And then, our foreheads touched. Just for a moment. But in that moment, everything else disappeared. The candlelight. The thunder. The guilt. The titles. It was just us. And then, he kissed me. Soft. Careful. Like he was asking permission with his lips. And I didn't pull away. I wish I could say I stopped it. That I remembered who we were. That I reminded him, or myself, what was at stake. But the truth? I didn't want to. The next morning, the air felt different. Still. Heavy. Like the house knew. I woke up on the couch, blanket wrapped around me, the candles melted to stubs. The rain had stopped. The silence had returned. But it wasn't the same silence I used to know. This one felt loaded. Michael was already up. Dressed. Shoes on. He was standing by the door, keys in hand, staring at the floor like it might open up and swallow him whole. When I sat up, he looked over, but didn't meet my eyes. He just said I should get going, and before I could respond, he was gone. No goodbye. No glance back. Just the sound of the door clicking shut behind him. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, trying to piece together what had just happened, trying to convince myself it wasn't as real as it felt. But it was. And everything had changed. Clara came back later that afternoon. Bags in hand, smile on her face, chatting about her retreat, the hotel food, a speaker she liked. I nodded along, smiled where I was supposed to, but inside I felt like I was cracking open. She hugged me tight, told me she missed me, said she was glad Michael had kept me company. I think I stopped breathing when she said that. She looked so happy, so trusting, so sure of her life, her marriage, her place in the world. And I stood there, her mother, holding a secret that could destroy everything she loved. I felt sick. Michael didn't come over that week. Not once. No texts. No calls. Nothing. At first, I was relieved. Then confused. Then angry. And then, ashamed of all of it. I saw him once. From the kitchen window. He was helping Clara bring in groceries. She laughed at something he said. He smiled. But the second she turned her back, he glanced up, toward my window. And our eyes met. Just for a second. And what I saw in his face wasn't desire. It wasn't regret either. It was pain. Raw. Complicated. The kind of pain you don't have words for. And I looked away. I couldn't hold his gaze. I couldn't hold anything. I kept going through the motions. Making tea. Folding laundry. Watering plants I didn't care about. But inside, I was unraveling. I had everything to lose. And no one to blame but myself. I wanted to tell myself it was a moment. A mistake. A lapse in judgment brought on by loneliness and candlelight and too many unspoken things. But the truth is, I knew what I was doing. And now, I had to live with it. I've gone over that night 100 times in my mind. Rewound it. Slowed it down. Tried to pick apart the exact second things shifted from innocent to something else. I keep asking myself, was it loneliness that led me there? Or was it finally feeling wanted? Because that feeling of being wanted, seen, chosen, even for a moment, it was intoxicating. And it terrified me. For years, I was touched out of routine, not desire. Spoken to out of obligation, not interest. Loved, if you can call it that, out of habit, not choice. I lived in a marriage where my presence was treated like furniture. Necessary. Reliable. But never admired. Never appreciated. And Michael. He looked at me like I mattered. Like I still had something left in me worth seeing. So then I ask myself, is it betrayal if the love was never really there to begin with? Is it cheating if the vows were already broken in every other way? Or am I just trying to soften what I did? Trying to make excuses so I can live with myself? I don't know anymore. The guilt sits heavy. Sometimes it shows up in my throat, tight, dry, unspoken. Other times in my chest, like there's something sharp lodged behind my ribs that I can't pull out. I watch Clara laugh. I watch her lean into him on the couch, whisper something in his ear, and giggle. And I wonder, how much of it is real? How much of it is habit? How much of it is just youth and inexperience, the way mine once was? Should I tell her? Should I confess and let the pieces fall where they may? Or would that just be cruelty disguised as honesty? Would it help her or destroy her? Would it be justice or just more pain? Sometimes I think I should carry this secret forever. Lock it inside me. Let it rot quietly so she never has to feel what I've been feeling since that night. But then I wonder, did he feel what I felt? Was that moment real for him? Or was it pity? Was I just a woman past her prime, grasping for something that never really existed outside my imagination? I don't know. He's avoided me since. No words, no closure. Just a look across a room that says everything and nothing at once. And now I live in this silence again. But it's not the same silence I once knew. This one is filled with echoes of what I did, what I felt, what I can never take back. Have you ever made a choice that felt both right and wrong at the same time? Like your heart said yes while your conscience screamed no? Because that's where I'm living now, right in the middle of that mess. Where there are no clean answers, just echoes of the same question over and over again. Should I have stopped it? Or was I just human? Was it weakness? Or was it a moment of honesty I wasn't strong enough to resist? I don't know. But maybe you do. Maybe you've been here too. Not in the same story, but in the same ache. If you've ever felt that pull between what's right and what's real, tell me. Tell us. Leave a comment. Say the thing you've never said out loud. Because silence doesn't heal anything. And maybe we're not as alone as we think. And if this story hit something deep inside you, something tender or raw or unresolved, share it. Someone out there might be carrying the same guilt in silence. And maybe your honesty will give them the courage to breathe again. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that aren't simple or sanitized, but real, messy, and human, subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. Because the most powerful stories are the ones we're afraid to tell. Desire doesn't always look like lust. Sometimes, it looks like someone remembering your favorite tea. It looks like a hand reaching for yours in a quiet moment. It looks like someone finally seeing the parts of you thought had died. Sometimes, desire is just the ache to be acknowledged, to be chosen, even for 1 second, in a world that's taught you to disappear. I crossed a line. I know that. But maybe I was already lost long before that night. And in the end, what I've learned is this: loneliness can make even the strongest heart do things it never imagined. And now I carry that truth. Quietly. Every day. Like a scar no one else can see. But if you're carrying something too, you're not alone. You're not a monster. You're human. And sometimes being human is the hardest thing of all.